Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So first off, you're probably wondering why this isn't the movie trailer video that I promised you guys for this week. Well, you're right. This isn't that video because I haven't finished it yet. I haven't finished the trailer. That will now be coming out next week. My apologies. But this week, we're gonna be talking about iPhone photography, but more specifically, 10 tips that you can use to improve your iPhone photography. Let's go. So let's get started with number one, and that is use grid view on your iPhone. So basically what grid view does is it divides your camera screen into 9 different squares. Let's use these flowers for example. They're basically composition lines. So if you place the focal points of your image on those lines or on the crosshairs where they connect, then your image will come out with the best composition that it can be. Yeah, so I'm filming a video for, you know, the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm gonna put this on the internet.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, well, have a good morning. See you.
Bye.
So that's basically the rule of thirds. These are some of the photos I just took then, and you can see how they are composed better. They've got the flower that's in the main focal point is in a nice position on the camera screen. Just like you would see in a Hollywood movie, they use this same technique of using the rule of thirds to compose their film images as well as photo images. So that's number one. These flies are deranged. Now moving on to number two, which you might be familiar with, and that is burst mode on the iPhone. Now, what you can do when you're in camera, you can hold down the photo button and it will, hear that? That's the sound of the iPhone taking like 15 photos. So when you hold it down, it basically just goes and just takes a lot of photos in a short amount of time, so you can just capture the action shots that you want to capture. And now I'm gonna do a demonstration of this using that puddle right there. So basically I've got a few little rocks here, little pebbles that I'm gonna drop into this puddle, and I'm gonna capture it using the iPhone burst mode. Okay, so I managed to get some pretty interesting and unique shots from doing that, because the thing with the iPhone is that it shoots so quick, much quicker than this camera does, which is like a proper DSLR, and much quicker than a lot of other cameras do. Apple is doing an incredible job of that. And these are some of the photos we just got then, and you can see how I've froze the rock in the air, I've got the splash, I've got everything, and with a little bit of editing, that could look really nice. So on to number three, which are that iPhones naturally have a wide angle lens in them. So if you want to get more compressed photos, more like cinematic Hollywood style photos, then you'll need to counteract that wide angle a little bit. So the way I do this, as you can see here with my laptop, it's almost morphed because of how wide the lens is in the iPhone. Now what we can do to counteract that is, if we just take a simple step or two backwards and we zoom in, instead of being as close as we can, then it'll compress the background and it should bring back some of the natural shapes of whatever you're taking a photo of, and it just counteracts that wide angle nature of the lens. On to number four, which is angles. So this tip's pretty simple. It's basically, if you're walking around and you find something you want to take a photo of, don't just, you know, aim it and just snap and be like, damn, that's cool. Because most of the time it's not, because you haven't thought about the angles that you want to use to take the photo. This is what I'm saying. If you're walking and you see, you know, this nice long rail, if you want to take a photo of that, instead of just doing this, you just want to take a step back, observe what kind of angles you can get on this that will be unusual and unique, that you wouldn't usually see in reality, because if someone's walking past that, most of the time they've seen that angle because they can see it through their eyes hundreds and hundreds of times. Morning. I'm just filming a video.
You're just filming yourself?
Yeah, for a YouTube video.
Okay, what are you going to do?
It's a photography tutorial on how to take better phones with your iPhone.
Oh, good one.
So I'm just filming that now, just in case you're wondering what I was
think
doing.
you were crazy already.
All good. Have a good morning, guys. So these are the photos that I just took then, and you can see how you're sort of, it's an unusual angle that you wouldn't usually see, because unless you see someone, you know, putting their face up really close. So just take a step back and observe what you're trying to take a photo of, and just see what kind of angles are unique and people wouldn't have usually seen. So that's really my basic rule, is anything that is not eye level, because that's what someone would usually see through their eyes if they're looking at it. You just want to get something a little bit different or obscured that'll just be more interesting. Enough talk, let's move on to number 5, which is get off the lens, bug. Let's try that again. Moving on to number 5, which is keep your photos simple. You just want one point of focus in your image. This is 2 different photos that I just took right then. You can see the first one is quite bland and flat. You can just see the houses. There's no real point of focus in the image, and that's because iPhone photos tend to not have a real big depth of field, and this is the way you should be taking photos with your phone, not trying to overcrowd the image. Number 6. So this one ties into the last one that I just talked about, and that is show depth in your photos. So let's move back to the photo of the flowers beforehand. This is one that I took that just looks extremely flat. You can barely even see the stems of the flowers because they're blending in so much with the background, because I haven't tried to show depth in the photo. There's not something clearly in the foreground and the background of the photo, so they sort of just all merge together into one mush that is the photo. So you need to clearly show the difference between the foreground and the background of your image in order to make it look the best it can be. Otherwise, it'll just look like a 2D mush fest. Moving on to number 7. Surprise, surprise. We're back over at the puddle for number 7, which is reflections. Reflections is a really awesome thing you can utilize with your iPhone or with any phone, because with the camera, it's very one-sided on the iPhone. My camera's right here, so I can get the phone really low down. I can get lower with an iPhone than I can with this camera, with most cameras, because it's just so portable and mobile. So this helps with reflections a lot. So I can basically put the phone really low down and get some really nice reflections. So the photos that I just got were extremely quick because it's very uncomfortable being in this position. You can see the amazing reflections we got because we managed to get the iPhone so close to the puddle. It's more like a lake at this point, but so close to the water that it just bounces the light off and you can get the most amazing reflections. And I've mentioned reflections in a lot of my past videos because I believe it's really underrated in the photography community, especially iPhone photography and phone photography in general. Moving on, tip number 8, and that is portrait versus landscape. Which one should you use to take photos with your iPhone? Now, my basic rule is if you're posting it on social media, wherever, Instagram, Facebook, then portrait is the must for that, because it just takes up more of the feed space. I've made so many videos saying that because I think that a lot of people don't do it either. Now, social media, portrait, wherever, anywhere else, you can do either. But that's my basic rule. On to the next tip. Now, this one is quite complicated compared to the other ones, but it is to use the HDR feature that you have in your iPhone camera. Now, HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. High Dynamic Range is basically the contrast between the brightest part of your image and the darkest part of your image. As you can see here, the sky is the brightest part of my image. My jacket is the darkest part. So you can see how my jacket is pretty much black And the sky is, you can kind of see it, it's pretty well exposed, but if I turn this up, you can see, now you can see my jacket, but the sky is got a lot more whiter. Now that's the dynamic range of my camera. Ideally, you should be able to see all the detail on the darkest part, which is my jacket, and all the detail that's in the sky here, which you can't because this camera doesn't have the best dynamic range, and no cameras can do it perfectly, but your iPhone camera can do it pretty well. So what you do to turn the HDR on is basically you go into your camera and up the top you can see HDR, and it should have a line through it unless you have it turned on already. And you just click that, and if you turn it on, basically when you take a photo, it'll take 2 or 3 different photos really quick. So you need to have it really still, preferably on a tripod, otherwise it'll just come out blurry. And what it does is it takes, let's say 3 photos with different exposure settings and merges them together. So it takes one with the sky, where you can see all the detail in the sky, takes another one where you can see all the detail in the jacket, and it'll mush them together so you can have a really high dynamic range. So you can see the detail in the jacket and in the sky. That's basically what it does. Moving on to the final tip, which is frame, don't aim. Now this basically means you want to frame your photos rather than just aiming and snapping your photos. You want to frame the composition, everything that I've mentioned in this video that'll make your photo look 10 times better if you're shooting with an iPhone, instead of just going and aiming and just boop, take a photo. You just want to think about framing it first before you take the photo. That's basically frame, don't aim. Just remember that before you go out and take photos with your iPhone. It'll help a lot, trust me. And that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have an amazing weekend. If you're an aspiring filmmaker or photographer, or you just want to be entertained, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. The movie trailer video will be coming out next week, so just hold your horses. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.